Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Andra, where the topic about sex is from the point of view of another woman, an older woman at that. Hello out there. I hope your December is all Christmas filled, or holidays for all. And all lit up, because I know there are all different types of holidays and everybody does something different around this time. So show us what it is all about and how we come from all different worlds. This is a very good time for that. And going into the new year is just that. We have been covered. Affied. New word. And I think we could use a little cheering up with not having to think too much, really. But, we talk about good sex and how we can basically make our partners say, wow, or do it again. And having good sex and good positions and all this stuff, hand jobs, blow jobs, you name it. But we do get a good laugh out of the worst sex, how can we say, experiences, shall we put it? And we all have had them in the past. And no one can get up and say that they've had a very good experience all of the time, because how does your partner learn what you want and what you like, and vice versa, if you don't fumble in the sack? So, granted, sex is one of those things you will remember and talk about, and generally, if it's bad, oh God, it's bad. So we are going to talk and describe the worst sex ever. I'm going to go through them. And, I'm assured you've either experienced them or you've heard of somebody who has experienced these worst sex items in life. They are there. You can't have it go great all the time because you don't learn. But I'm assured that's probably the topic of conversation when you go out and you're back with your friends and you're talking about, oh, girl you picked up in the club, or that guy you picked up in the club, and they knew you were back to either their place or yours to get your groove on, and you're going to talk about it. So let's start it off. Now, the first worst sex someone has ever had, shall I say, and it involves 3 words: 3-inch dick. I don't think I have to explain that any better, but yes, you got that person who's talking it up. Like they are like amazing, the greatest package going. And then you get them in the bed and they, either want to take off their pants or they take off their pants. And what happens? It is no bigger than 3 inches long. And please, I know a lot of people, this is a reality. Someone actually, their worst sex ever was with somebody who was obese. And when they, this person refused to take their pants off. But when they did, all they saw was this little tiny winky, small penis. So what do you do then? Do you embarrass them? Do you do it because you're there? Think about that. That was their worst ever. They were already getting the groove and boom. Ta-da! Another person's, this is a woman. These are all women, by the way. And I'm sure the men have their tales, but right now we're talking about the women. And another worst sex experience someone has had is where he fingered me so hard that I had to go to the hospital. Guys, what are you trying to do? Scratch our brains? This was a hookup. And I guess the woman had an IUD in. And the guy fingered her so hard that she had to go to the hospital because the IUD almost punctured her uterus. So, guys, it's one to get the girl off and you're fingering them because, yes, this is a way to get the women aroused. But doing it so hard, come on. You don't like to be kicked in your penis, in your manhood. So what you think, that we don't feel? A woman is not going to get hurt. Another instance a woman had. He insisted on putting on a robe and wizard hat. Can we say the beginning of that role play was probably some good foreplay, but I don't think it went that well quite thereafter. Moving right along, another woman states, each time he thrust, his stomach kept blocking him from fully entering me. She liked this guy, a little bit on the chubby side. There was no problem with that. However, when it came to sex, it got in the way before his penis did. So, and as she's trying to get her groove on, something's blocking. Another woman went to give the guy a blowjob. And it was the length and girth of a chapstick. Okay, she reached down, was gonna get him hard. Not a lot down there to even put your mouth on. Very, very small. Another instance. Now I know what dick cheese tastes like. Ooh, let's explain that one. Let's see what kind of experience this was. This woman goes down on a guy who never has been circumcised. So it didn't really retract when he got erected. So she had to really push it with her mouth. She states that once she did push it back, she started feeling something lumpy on her tongue, and his penis tasted awful, so she obviously got up and realized that the top of his penis was covered with white curd. That's not, it was improper hygiene. Right down to the point. Now come on, guys. Most of you guys know if you were not circumcised that you really need to pull back that foreskin and clean thoroughly. That's like you coming up to a woman and saying that she's got, a yeast infection or she smells or something. It happens to you guys too. So, another woman states, dude finished and immediately started talking about clowns while laying on top of me. So, we know he was finished and got, ejaculated, and then starts talking about clowns. A lot of people have mixed feelings when it comes to clowns. So I don't think that was really good sex talk. Another woman. A baseball-sized cyst on my tailbone burst, and there was blood and pus everywhere. That was her first time. She bled everywhere because it was the size of a baseball and it was on her tailbone. So when it burst, blood and pus came out everywhere. But the good side to that one was that the guy she was with actually understood and actually did the laundry quietly, changed the sheets after, got her a change of clothes and some gauze for it. And believe it or not, they're getting married, or they're already married. So that right there, although one of the worst experiences for the woman, actually had a happy ending. So there are ways to turn it around. Moving right along on the women's worst sex experiences. His sperm was so bitter that I audibly gagged and retched. Ooh, I don't think a guy wants to hear that, but hey, she actually took the guy home. She picked him up in a bar after she was totally inebriated, 3 sheets to the wind, whatever you want to call it. He was on the smaller side in the penis area. She didn't have an issue with that, although I think the alcohol had a lot to do with that. But when it did come to having sex, it just wouldn't go in. So he couldn't penetrate her. They tried every position, still no luck. And then she gets the giggles. Unbelievable. So she decides to turn around because, penetration wasn't working, to give him head instead. Give him that blowjob, because every guy loves it. Then he came in her mouth, and because it was nasty tasting, which heaven only knows if the alcohol had anything to do with that, but she basically spoke out about it. Not something a guy wants to hear, thank you. Moving right along with our women's worst sex experiences. One states that mid-coitus, he started chanting, just screwing in my socks. Screwing in my socks. Okay. Apparently, during sex, the guy left on his socks. And in the middle of it, he decides to start screaming that out over and over again. Then he finishes. He asks her if she did too. And she had to turn around and tell him, if you gotta ask, then the answer's probably no. And I don't think she could have concentrated on her orgasm as the guy screaming, "Screwing in my socks." Yeah, not something you might want to scream out, guys. Yeah. Oof. Actually, I feel for that woman. The woman states, "He accidentally smacked my face first into the bookshelf above the bed." Ooh. Yikes. She did find the guy very, very hot. And it was a casual friend of hers. They get to that point where they, tried to hook up, get together. Obviously, alcohol was involved, as does most worst sex experiences do. Turns out that they were both turned on, to that little bit of submission side of things, that little bit of kink. But that didn't have anything to do with it. It was not, really a problem. They kept trying. But then when he went to, flip the two of them over, all forcibly, that's when he smacked her face into the bookshelf above the bed. But he kept trying. He didn't even stop. Then he pulled out and came on the wall. Oh my goodness gracious. It was her friend's room, and obviously she was embarrassed and felt really bad. Yeah, that would be a hell of an experience. I hope the woman's okay. And on that note, we're going to take our first break in the show. So do get a snack, do get a drink, and come back and get relaxed. And I will meet you back here for more Sex Talk with Andra.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Andra, where the topic about sex is from the point of view of an older woman. Now, we started off our conversation or our topic on worst sex ever, and we are on women's worst sex ever experiences. And hoping that that last woman is doing very well now after having her face smashed into the bookshelf above the bed. So we are going to move along on this lovely topic, because we all have stories, and not just women. Men have stories, and I'm assured you guys that's what you talk about. So moving along. This next woman stated, "He was flopping around me." Oh my goodness. He was she didn't know what was going on. He was flopping all around her. And then he kept repeating to her, over and over, that I'm really good when I'm on top, aren't I? Now, she generally is very proactive in her sexual endeavors. However, she didn't know what to do. She just patted him on the back and kept quiet, basically. After that, she left and didn't talk to him again. Because you're going to come back and have that, that thought process there. Now the next is, if I wanted to bleep myself, with a 9-inch dildo, I could have stayed at home. Now, apparently, this partner had a very well-endowed penis, but he didn't move at all, didn't make a noise either. And it was just like she was at home masturbating. And he actually got off on it, but she did not. I'm sure he thought that she did, but she didn't. One woman said, we head to his room, and he turns into a really bad porn star. Can't even say the word. But I think you know what I'm talking about. Apparently this was a good friend of hers, or is a good friend of hers. She's been in love with this person. Finally they get together. And they were both single, so, they were kind of sort of getting, that vibe between each other. Then one night they got together. And they could feel that, the both of them wanted to go to bed with each other. They go to his room, and he turns into a really, really bad porn star. Whereas he starts saying to her, oh, you like that, you slut, don't you? Take it, yeah, you whore. And smashing like he was trying to bounce me off the bed. Evidently, her thought process and her view of this individual now was no more really liking or being in love with them and having their eye on them for all these years. She was actually horrified. And the fact that she has a very good relationship with his family and his mom. And they exchange selfies to each other, everything. It was just so bad. And ended that crush pretty darn quickly. Oh, I feel you, girl. I have to go into the bathroom and try to fish this rogue condom out of my bloody mess of a vagina. Okay, I really don't think anybody needs explanation to this one. But she states that, she's never had bad sex until this particular incident. She meets a guy on online dating, believe it or not, Tinder. Come on. Everybody knows about it. And they had so much in common. So, I guess she agreed to smoke with him at his apartment one evening. They were really doing good, hitting it off. It was really going great. There were no awkward silences, nothing like that. The conversation was really, really good. And then they went to go have sex. Apparently, he waited about 30 to 45 seconds before pulling off her pants and shirt. Then he takes not one but two fingers and just starts jabbing up there over and over again. No preheating of the oven, nothing. So basically what he did was he just took these two fingers and slammed them right into her vagina, trying to get her lubricated, instead of, titillating that clitoris and everything like that, and playing around and getting, her in the mood with some foreplay. And when he pulls him out, because he did it so hard, his hand was bloody. He ends up leaving a bloody handprint on her thigh. And he just basically made her bleed. He apologized, which was good. But he just continued. He didn't, it was like it was nothing. He actually finished off pretty quick. Goes to get out the condom. And he keeps going. However, it was taking just a little bit longer than she was anticipating. And basically, she's hoping it's over soon. But obviously, he's getting tired. And he really, she tells him, just pull it out. He does. And apparently the condom is missing, obviously. They go into the bathroom. They're trying to fish around, finding this condom in her vagina. She's bleeding because he jabbed her too hard up there. It was really, she got, her friends even told her, you should have just left after that, after just the fingering alone. And which at this point she really feels that she should have. But, she's being nice. It's funny because she continues to really hang out with him because there is a lot in common with the two of them. But for her to go back to bed with him, she's like, nah. But she does like him as a friend, and they're hanging out, which is a good thing that came out of that. So it's always a positive sometimes. Another winner explains what feels like a cup full of semen just pours in me. Oh my goodness. She basically starts by saying, the foreplay in the night was going pretty good, started out really good. She's a really, petite, a little, well, she's petite and he's like slightly taller than her. Real skinny guy. And they were making out. And they went, they were taking off, clothing here and there and everything. And he touched her body. Did some, little maneuvers with his mouth over her hips and thighs and everywhere else where he should have. And she really liked it because it was really turning her on. And apparently he didn't take off his underwears while his underwear's off while his face was at her hips. So I guess he suddenly held her legs and without a word pinned them back with her knees around her armpits and her ankles at her wrist. So you're getting the idea. He took her legs and he put them up basically around her ears. And which is not a bad position, but out of nowhere. And then she just starts reacting to this, like with an overabundance of surprise. When he sees this, like, body appear. Revealed, sorry. When she sees this body revealed. She describes his penis as a wooden school ruler or something to measure sea depth with. He just swiftly pushes it all into her. He didn't even ease it in. He just takes it all and just, puts it all in. Gives a slight pause every 2 inches or whatever to snug each bit down. So she stated that it didn't hurt, but it was kind of like, oh my goodness, feel your body adjusting to being filled with no gaps and one slow push. So basically, she's okay with all of this until, because he left his underwears on, so she didn't know what the size was. Then he goes and withdraws about 1/3 of his penis out and then back in again. He continued to do this several times. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he basically moans really loud, went all the way in, and then what feels like a cupful, like she said, of semen just pours into her. He ends up relaxed, looking happy, and that sex was, he got his groove on and everything. But she's in the end saying, "Oh my goodness, I am so glad that I am on the pill," because she was. It went from 50 to 1,000 in 12 seconds. Love her explanation. She is too funny. Another woman pressed his tongue against the clit and then shook his head like a dog. Guys, where do you think that this helps a woman? Yeah, it's one thing to give them oral sex, give us women oral sex. It's another the way you do it. Please. Upon, him doing this, she said she didn't know what he was going for, but it was the most bizarre experience. And she kind of basically sucked it up and faked the fact that he thought he was doing very well down there and giving her oral sex, and basically left it alone, let him finish. Now, this one, I got to say, has to top one of the worst sex that I've ever read, heard of. Whereas he passed out while eating me out. He was in the middle of oral sex and fell asleep. She was in the middle of it. He's, giving her oral sex. That it was his entire face got heavy. And it stopped moving between her legs for about a minute. And this was before she even realized that anything was what he was doing wasn't actually a form of oral sex. So she shook his head to wake him up. He gave her a scrunched up and sour, "Why'd you wake me up?" face, and then denied ever falling asleep in her crotch. Oh, guys, come on. You can't make this up. I'm just totally amazed that you think that this is good. Heaven only knows if this was a long-term relationship it was in. I'm taking it wasn't. And it was what? It's really, if you two are together and you've been together for a long time, he works all weird hours and he's tired, that, and it's inevitable. You're not going to hold it against him. But if it's that sex where you basically pick someone up in a club or at a bar or whatever, or it could be that friend that you've been eyeing and crushing on, and then that happens, yeah, not a good impression. Trust me. On that note, we are going to go to break. So please replenish your drink, replenish your snack, or you could stay right there and finish out what you are doing, or continue. Get a new toy. Who's to say? But I will meet you back here after the short break for more sex talk with Andra.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Andra, where the topic about sex is from the point of view of an older woman, and we are discussing women's worst sex experiences. Remember, I could not make this up if I tried. And I love the fact that it is from the woman's point of view, because back in the day, you did not, you did whatever you want. You didn't talk about the guy or anything, but the guy did talk about the woman. This is liberating in this time and age to know they are standing up and letting you know, guys, remember, it goes both ways. We're going on with our women and their worst sex experiences, where we have a woman that felt like I was sliding down a dry slip and slide. She begins by really explaining, about a month earlier, this guy couldn't find her clit. He couldn't even get her wet. But he ends up telling her don't make him do all the work. So basically, okay, fine, she decides, well, let me just ride his penis. Obviously, she turns around. It was really painful because either he had one of the condoms that does not have lubrication on them, and you can buy them. They're in the sex stores, which are actually supposed to be better for you, but they are, they don't have lubrication on them. So you gotta kind of put lubrication on them. And so he just did it. She's not lubricated herself. She's not even wet at all. And then he continues to say, ask her if she needed an instruction manual. She points out that this is coming from a 46-year-old that does not know how to even perform oral sex. She put it a little bit more colorful, shall we say. And it was really bad for her. Really bad. It was weird to the point where he turns around and tells her that her vagina, again gave it a choice word, was built weird, and he couldn't last long enough because she was too tight. Okay, no lubrication. You go in. What did you think was going to happen? Not only can you hurt yourself, men, by bending your penis and possibly breaking it, if you want to put it nicely, but you're going to injure the woman. Hello? This is the whole idea of foreplay. Don't make it look like it's all the woman's fault, because Lord knows some of you guys don't know what you are doing. So, a woman usually makes you think you know what you're doing. Just remember that. This next one states, it was like the opposite of giving birth. I wanted to sleep with him, but it wouldn't fit. Well, in this case, the woman actually did have a guy who had a very well endowed package of a huge penis. And it was one of the biggest ones she has ever seen. So basically, she just immediately falls in love with him because of it. However, that when she did go to bed with him to have sex, he couldn't fit inside her vagina. Very upset. She was an adult, very sexually experienced. That huge, and you got to really think about this here. If you're too small, a woman's going to tell you they can't feel you, and they want to. If you're too huge and you can't even get past the gates, well, unfortunately, it's a double-ended sword. So you got to look at it that way. Moving right along, his hand slipped, and he straight up punched me in the vagina. Oh, this was back in her college days. She hooks up with this guy. Guy was really going to town trying to get in the mood. He was basically doing a real vigorous finger job on her. And it was like really to the point where his hand just slipped. And when it slipped, because he was going back and forth, turned around and ended up punching her in the vagina. Then he rolls over. This is ballsy. He rolls over and practically demands for her to give him a blowjob. Ooh, guys, not a wise choice, especially when you're putting your penis in her mouth. Can you say teeth? And I'm pretty sure, don't piss a female off when they're down there because they will bite you. So, now she decides to give him that blowjob. And it was the worst. It was an intentionally worst blowjob that she's ever done. And then he turns around and just climbs on top of her, proceeds to make this weird grunting sound to non-rhythmic thrusts, about 30 to 45 seconds. He ends up looking at her and says that he's good. She didn't have a clue what to say or what to reply, but she does turn around and she goes, "What?" And she goes on to describe that this boy was about 200 pounds crushing my little body, so it came out as more of a wheeze, which he took in the affirmative, as if thinking that he got her off, and it didn't. He gave the excuse that he thought he heard his roommates coming, and in the bathroom next door, because when you're in college, you have the rooms that you're really close, and they were adjoining. So he basically rolled off of her, yelled at her to get her clothes on, and he came so quickly, and this was his retaliation. I think, she states that he, was probably embarrassed, and she put on her pants and she left. They didn't speak to each other ever again. Generally happens in the college scene. When a guy would do that, I'm assured a woman is like, "What? You're in college. It's all about who, can get the girl, basically." So when you're there to have fun and everything else, sex and fun and parties. He fell asleep, woke up, came on my car seat, then puked all over the inside of my car door. Oh yeah, this one's bad. So she basically hooked up with somebody she worked with. So they got together one night at a party. They were making out. They wanted to go to the car because, they're getting heated up in that little bit of making out. And halfway through all of it, it went from to, okay, to, is this MFer asleep? Like he basically passed out. She patted him on the back. And, it was like, are you sleeping? Like basically puzzled. And then he came back, mumbled no, and then tried to take his penis and basically jam it into her inner thigh, where she is actually telling him it's her leg. He's not listening. Then he came in the seat. He swore to God he was in her vagina and penetrating her, and he wasn't. So he ends up coming all over the seat, ejaculating, coming, proper word, and then puked all over the inside of her car door. Not only did she have to clean the semen off the seats, she literally had the smell and stench and puke on her door. And if we know how our car doors are, there are other speakers there, so there are little openings. I'm just hoping it didn't go down that far. So, another woman, I kicked him out and ordered a pizza. Now, this was her birthday. It was her 20th birthday. And then this guy particularly, was coming 2 hours to be with her for 30 minutes. Then they had really awkward sex. And then she actually faked it because he didn't get her off. And that was, according to her, her only time she faked an orgasm. It was so bad she told him to just go home and that she was too tired to do anything else. She ends up kicking him out. He leaves. After a 2-hour drive, you think it would have been a hell of a lot better than that and worth it. But she ends up ordering the pizza, and the pizza was better than the sex. I lost my virginity and almost died. So apparently, she actually lost her virginity and almost died. Literally. She was in her mid-20s. She was drunk. And she went with this guy. She had only gone out with him for a few times. And she never got around, to telling him that he was, basically she was a virgin. She thought that by telling him he'd be okay with that. Or the fact that he really didn't need to know, so she basically kept it from him. Then it comes to where he stops in the middle of it because there's a pool of blood. Obviously, she's a virgin. Not all women bleed when you're a virgin, but majority of the time you do. Okay, so this guy sees this pool of blood. He stops. He's, it's on the comforter. It looked like a half a liter of blood. It was a lot of blood. She, scrambles off and to clean herself up in the bathroom. And she left bloody footprints all over the white carpet. Oh my gosh. All over the white carpet. Over the next few days, obviously it was hurting her to pee. She thought it was normal because she was a virgin. Then it went into even more excruciating pain. She went to the doctor. And the doctor tells her, you have a UTI, urinary tract infection, and gives her meds. Unfortunately, they didn't end up working. It ended up leading to a kidney infection, which gave her a super high fever, which she goes back to the ER. And she said that the doctors in the ER told her that she almost went into septic shock. Very, very, very bad. So this is her story of her worst sex experience. And, when you're a virgin, either a man or a woman, that first sexual experience is, in your mind, supposed to be a liberating thing and really good. But for the most part, you're stumbling. So it isn't that good. In only a few instances where you'll get somebody who comes back and tells you that they had an awesome first time of virginity. You know, not everybody can tell you that. But there are those out there that can. So, moving right along. I had sex with a guy who got off after 5 minutes and left with the used condom in his pocket. Can you say evidence? Isn't it Monica Lewinsky here, people? And this is as she's like an adult. She invited this guy over. They had been, basically briefly seeing each other a little bit earlier in the year. He was something that she really found attractive. It was her type, but he didn't have the game to back it. So he did ask. He came over. He asked if he could use the shower before, having sex. He wanted to be clean, and she didn't. Lord knows where he's been. So she wanted to basically clean him, have him clean. Now they get down and dirty into it. He goes down on her. Well, actually, she goes down on him, and he doesn't return the favor. He actually puts on rubber gloves and gets inside her. Puts his fingers in there. And it wasn't really long, like, as they were into the foreplay that, her pelvic muscles contracts. And obviously, it's enhancing both of their pleasure receptacles there. All of a sudden, he makes his face, he grimaces. And he turns around and says to her, "What do you do, like a million Kegels a day?" Which is a pelvic exercise. It is funny because she returns and asks, I asked if I'm hurt. Or he says, I asked if I'm hurting him. Or same the other way around. She asks him if, while he's in her, is she hurting him? And he, obviously he's the guy, he's going to reply no. And then, within 2 minutes of that being asked, he does the same face again. He shudders and dismounts. He actually ejaculated, but she was barely beginning to enjoy herself. And basically the sex lasted 5 minutes, where he drove 45 minutes to get to her. Basically takes off the condom, sets it on the bed. She gets him something to clean up with. He grabs the rubber, so basically doesn't leak on the bed. And as she's about to throw it into the trash, he actually asked for it back. So I'm totally not amazed with that, but that is, you really need to realize this. He must have had a bad experience because he ends up tying a knot in the condom and she never saw him again. So I guess he must have been, watching the whole thing that went down with Monica Lewinsky and President Clinton and felt he needed to take his sperm home, thinking, I guess this woman's going to take his sperm to the sperm bank and have it artificially inseminated into her. Oh my goodness. On that note, we are going to take our last break in the show. So basically, your option of what you want to do, but if you are in the middle of pleasuring yourself, please do stay there and continue. I will be back after the break to more sex talk with Andra.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Andra, where the topic about sex is from the point of view of an older woman. Now, welcome back to the final portion of my show today, as we are talking about women's worst sex experience. Again, guys, it isn't all about you. And for the most part, a woman's generally lying to make you feel good. So they don't want to hurt your ego. So let's continue on. Hope you're comfortable. His dick was so small, it felt like a tampon. Now, first of all, when I was going to high school, the girls were using tampons. I feel that if you're a virgin, tampons shouldn't be the first thing that you're doing. But hey, a lot of women love them. And they'll even have sex with them which is a whole nother story within themselves. However, this woman was in the 9th grade, and she basically had this massive crush on the most popular guy. You know, he didn't really look at her. He was too busy looking at the cheerleaders or the most popular girl for the most part. You know, as she grew up, I guess she was a little awkward. But as the years went on in her high school, and growing up, school years have passed. She's maturing, got an awesome haircut, and she just is now a hottie. So they ended up together on the 4th of July and basically having sex. Apparently the condom was too big for his penis. And then when he got on top of her like this, it was just horrible. He just started humping her closed legs. His penis was just flopping all over on her crotch area, on her area where her genitals are, but nowhere on the inside of her vagina. And then she ends up to tell him, you gotta wait, because she has to open up her legs so that he can actually, penetrate her. She's literally telling him this. And then when it gets down to it, his penis was small. Now, granted, they were young. They were about 15 years old. She didn't expect much, because they were, school-aged kids. But to her, now mind you, because, see, here's where my indifference comes in. Whereas she uses tampons, and here comes this boy, and she's having intercourse. He's 15 years old, and she basically can't tell the difference. You shouldn't be having sex at that age anyway. So she couldn't feel anything. Obviously, she was used to what a tampon felt like, so to her, him penetrating her didn't feel any different. And then she got her period while she was in the middle of this, and it got all over the sheets, and the sheets were white, and it got all over his penis. So obviously he was somewhat embarrassed, as was she. So he suddenly starts humming against my clit. Oh, this one's good. This one's a good one. Oh my god. I guess, in the middle of sex, she's known this person for a while, this guy, and it was basically going normal, whatever you want to consider normal, and it all the way up to the point where he basically just suddenly decides to go down on her, like to give her oral sex. And he's like up there saying, "Oh man, do I have a great treat for you?" You know, he's boasting about himself. And then he ends up humming, literally humming, against her clitoris. I don't know, maybe he felt it needed to be vibrated. I don't know, built-in vibrations. He didn't even lick it. He didn't even suck on it. He didn't even nibble at it. He was actually alongside of her clitoris, humming. And to him, he thought it was really good because he stopped saying, "Yeah, you like that, baby," asking all these questions. And she is like nowhere in the moment at this point because she doesn't know what the heck to say or expect. And she's now pulls, because she wants to laugh, but she doesn't want to embarrass him. So she pulls a pillow and she puts it over her face so she could laugh her behind off. And she's dying. But because he was into it, she didn't want him, she didn't want to embarrass him, but she couldn't take herself to that point to tell him to stop because he thought he was doing something good. And all the while, she's like, "Oh my goodness, I hope you just get out of there." She's not in the mood. She's not, she's wondering what female in their right mind told him, and she's like, this is what she's thinking, that actually feels good to a woman. She was it really put a nasty taste in her mouth, but she vowed never to see him again. He actually later on offered her free, sometime later, from free music festival tickets, and ended up, planning a fun weekend trip out of it. But, each time thought about going when she realized that she really could not face him humming into her or alongside of her clitoris. So, she basically just couldn't do it she couldn't get that thought and that vision out of her head. So, it kind of killed everything else. I was quite surprised when he took off his pants and I saw his family jewels were missing several carats. Uh-oh. Apparently this woman's dating this really, really great guy. And he treated her like a princess. He was really, really good to her. He was built like a hockey player. So that obviously, looking from the outside, the way he's treating her, really, really good. He's got the build of a hockey player. You think he's well endowed. And he takes off his pants. And there's something missing. It's just a little smaller than she thought would be, And then, right in the middle of sex, he stops and says to her, "Whoops, it fell out." "I didn't even notice," she says. It was really, because she states that, it would not have been nearly as bad if he tried to make sex of two-person experience, but it was quite obvious that was the one thing he was totally selfish about. So it was basically just him. She was just laying there. And yes, women, do it, guys. We will sit there. If you think you're going to town and you're doing good, they're not going to hurt your ego. They're going to let you finish, think you were good, and just agree. I think I told you this a little earlier. Let me just let me just say that again. Oh my goodness. My words today are off. I am just fumbling. So, I have my moments. This is one of those days. Moving right along. Went about 5 agonizing minutes of him awkwardly humping me with his limp biscuit before I told him to just stop. OMG. It was his first time. Well, her first time. He did put on a condom. And to go about his thing whatever way he does it. And then all the while he was completely soft. Nothing was going anywhere. He wasn't even getting up. So she basically told him, please stop, got up and walked home. You know, hey, what can I say? I was dry the entire time, this woman states. It was funny because she describes it as a comic with a tickle fetish, ironic or not. Anyways, not my cup of tea, but she told him everyone has something weird, so don't worry about it. You know, she kind of made him feel good about it. She was very clear that she was not interested in being tickled sexually, and actually hated tickling in general because she didn't like it. It bothered her. Everybody likes to be tickled. But he wouldn't stop. And then he goes about licking both of her armpits without even warning her. He couldn't keep pace and kept going softer and softer. And then she ended up being somewhat painful for her because he was not hard enough to penetrate her. You know, he didn't know how to use his hands. She was dry the entire time, and he kept saying he was going to get hard again to finish her off, to help her orgasm. But she was just like, really now, please. Like, there was nothing. He never got hard, but to him, he thought he did. And that he'd come back and get her, you know, get her off, get her to have an orgasm. I mean, they were joking around afterwards, and he had no idea they make porn for everything. And pulls up a video of a chick getting tickled and acts like it is the hottest thing he has ever seen. Oh, isn't that too funny? But he doesn't see it. She wasn't enjoying that. He thinks it's great. She's not. She's baffled by all of this. And don't kid yourself, really, because it is, yeah. And there are nothing in the world you could possibly do. Don't force your fetish on someone, especially if they're a new partner to you. Do not force them on them without talking to them and letting them know. Okay, it's just like trying any new sex. Fetish is not any different. Another one states, one painful thrust and MFer is done. I am not going to say those words. But this, she was seeing this guy for a couple of years. She really thought he was really cute. Kind of on the shorter side, but very athletic and fit. Then, things, they're making out. It's getting a little hot and bothered between the two of them. Getting all touchy. And then his pants just disappeared. And she doesn't even realize how fast he got them off or how he could get them off that fast. He grabs the waistband of her pants, rips them off, and slams his rather large penis and his scrotum, his package, the whole thing, balls and all, deep into a not-so-ready crumpet hole. I love the way she calls it dry vagina. Love it. She's basically horrified, scared, and in pain, obviously. Then, without even, he comes like wicked quick. That's all. It was just like he goes in, the whole package, doesn't even get her wet. On one thrust, he's done. She gets up, puts her pants on, and leaves, and he's sitting there lighting a cigarette. Didn't say anything to each other. She just goes, love it. Love it, love it, love it. You cannot write or even put into a play or the worst sex experience you're going to have. You think it's going to be good, and then it happens. And you're kind of baffled, and that sticks in your head now. I did go over women's worst sex experiences, but this goes for the guys as well, because you guys like to talk about it. Hey, it happens, but you live and learn by them as well. So, on that note, this is the end of my show for today. And as always, please practice safe sex. As you can hear in these worst sex experiences, not being properly lubricated or not being hard enough or too big or what, it's really painful on both ends. So, please do practice safe sex, if not for you, for your partner, and vice versa. Also, if you are going to try something new, and do not force any new ideas sexually or positions or fetishes or anything on your partner without educating, communicating, and consenting between the two of you. So on that note, I thank you for tuning into the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I also would like to ask that you subscribe to the show, and leave a good review, because I do get silly in these things, and it only helps me, but it does help the GSMC Podcast Network. Also, please look us up and like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And again, please leave, hit that little thumbs up there, that like, and tell us what you want to hear on the show and how much you like it. So, again, thank you, and have an awesome sex night and a great holiday, but I will be back. So come back and listen, because we are going to talk about a little Christmassy sex stuff too. So, good night for now. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.